highly experienced historian, these people are going to tell us something about Sesquicentennial celebrations. But I think I will call on Kay first. I would say that our celebration will mark 150 years since our town board meeting, our first town board meeting in April 1813. And this information, the first town meeting was held on the first Tuesday, April 1813, at the home house of Thomas Ure, and adjourned to his barn, where the issue was settled in the old-fashioned way. Thomas Ure, I think, resided at the house that's next to the old Norton home. It's right at the creek as you go down Cheese Factory Road. The first supervisor was Jonas Allen, and Timothy Barnard, William Brown, commissioners of school funds, Canada Street, Charles Day, and Daniel Dunks, inspectors of schools. $90 was noted for contingent expenses and $100 for the poor. This is the way it was given, some of it. But I'm going to turn over the meeting now, temporarily at least, to Mrs. Thompson and to Mr. Fisher. And when these people are through talking, we have lots of questions, and I'm sure lots of answers. Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready. All a lot of stuff with me, and I'm not going to dwell on it too long, but I thought that it might have to answer questions. All I ask is that I get it all back if I should pass it around. Some of it's nothing that I have. I do thank you for the opportunity of coming, and I think that I should preface my remarks with this. I am from Plainfield. We did have a Sesquicentennial. It was a very satisfactory observance. We made money on it. We did it the way we wanted to, and certainly nobody told us how to do it. Therefore, I am not here to tell you how to do yours. I'm only telling you how we did ours, and if you can pick my brains and get any ideas that will help you, you are welcome. But don't in any way think that I am trying to dictate, well, we did it this way and it was successful, therefore that's the way you should do it.
Excuse me, Kay. I think if you'll stay alone there, it'll take me.
Oh, I'm sure that you can hear me very well anyway, but I will go over.
And have the speaker stand alone there.
The thing that I want to stress, and I don't want to keep saying this is the way we did it, you just know that that's the way we did it, and whether it appeals to you or not, it was our way. Was that you can't start too early. You can't whip up a lot of enthusiasm too early, but your planning and your groundwork, your establishing yourself with the town board, with informing them that the date is coming up and that they should be preparing for it, that perhaps they should put money in the budget to help you with your expenses, and to publicize it enough so that perhaps the town itself is cleaned up and painted up and fixed up as nicely as it can be. All of those things will be benefits that you will not be able to do at the very last minute, so that if you can have any publicity about your Sesquicentennial with that in mind, certainly it is not too early to begin. I have here a letter that I wrote to our supervisor in May 1956, 4 years before our Sesquicentennial, reminding him that the year of 1960 is not far off. Another way that I felt I had built up interest in our own town was working with school children. This has become quite an activity of mine, and I enjoy it thoroughly, taking 5th graders out on bus trips around the town, showing them different points of interest, and going into their schoolroom before the trip and talking with them about 45 minutes and telling them why Penfield grew as it did, and reasons for knowing about our past. And I have a outline here which each child has, which they take home, and there is unusual amount of interest in this, not only from the children, but from their parents. Many of the parents are taken on the same trip again. I went down to Cooperstown 2 years before our Sesquicentennial with the idea of taking the course that they offered in outdoor historical pageants. I felt that perhaps this was the one thing that Penfield would want to do to celebrate their Sesquicentennial. I came home very enthused about the idea of an outdoor amphitheater and tried to propose it to our school board, and was very definitely sat upon that this was something that they couldn't afford to do while they were building a $1 million school. There were too many other things to think about, and I can see that they were probably right. But it is something that might be thought about in your own community. If there is a natural hollow that would lend itself, perhaps 2 years is, it's 1 year, isn't it? Maybe it isn't time enough then. They told me that there wasn't time enough to seed it in 2 years. But one of the things that they did tell us there was to avoid, if possible, the production companies. And we ended up our seminar with this, that never, never, we were told, fall into the clutching hold of the stereotype producer who with script and costumes go from town to town and give a show. You will be approached, I'm sure, your town board probably, by companies like the Rogers Company or by the Hooper Company who do this. They go around from community to community and whip up enthusiasm. It may be that this is the way you want to celebrate, but I think that you must remember that they have to take a certain percentage of the money out to pay for their staff. And some towns have made money, some towns have gone into the hole. So that it is a plan that at least should be carefully considered. I remember going out to Cadillac, Michigan, and seeing a pageant put on in quite a lavish scale, and then having the representative from the Rogers Company outline this pageant to us as something that we could do in Penfield, with coming of the railroads and bathtub gin and all the other things that he thought ought to be in it. And I said, well, that's fine, but I don't think that those things ever happened in our town. The railroad goes through one very small corner, and if there was bathtub gin, then they parted. So we did without them. We did it by starting again, and you have a good start, getting a group together. In our case, we don't have a historical society. We used to have one, but it has not functioned for several years. And I sent letters out to the presidents of all of the organizations in town. We are highly organized. There must have been 50 of them, church groups and PTAs and library boards and Girl Scouts and Legion and Extension Service, all of those things where people met in a group, and asked them to send their president and another representative, or at least 2 people if they could, to a meeting. This meeting was to be in September of 1958, 2 years, you see, before we were celebrating. And that group came. Not every organization was represented, but there were about 60 people there at the meeting. And from that group, we presented what might possibly be an outline, and asked them for ideas of what they thought might be things that we could do. Did they want to put on a pageant? Did they want beards? Did they think that a parade, an old home week, were the things that we wanted to do? The general consensus of opinion after this meeting, the first one, was that probably we would like something like an old home week with a pageant, and probably the beards would be, someone were in favor of it. So they thought there ought to be a baseball game, perhaps played in old-fashioned costumes and things like that. Well, now many of these ideas weren't carried out, and some others were, but at least it got people to talking and thinking. And at that meeting, we arranged to have a second meeting. That was about all that was done. We just discussed generally without making any plans or anything, but made arrangements for a second meeting in November. And at that time, we felt that this big group was too unwieldy. We had better narrow it down to a smaller group. So from the big meeting, we selected about 8 or 10 people and called them a steering committee. And that steering committee then met together, hashed over again the ideas that had come out of the bigger meeting, and with our town supervisor met together and selected 3 or 4 names of people that we could approach with the idea of being general chairman of this whole affair. We were very fortunate in the couple that we chose for general chairman. Mr. and Mrs. Lindsay had been president of our historical society when it was a going, thriving organization, and we're definitely interested in the town and in the nice, dignified celebration of our anniversary. Mr. Lindsay was a businessman, and he declared from the first, and he certainly kept his aim in front of him all the time, that this was not going to cost the taxpayers any money, that we were going to be in the black, not go into the red and have to have the town support our productions. Sometimes it seemed as if he was sort of clamping down on some of the ideas that people had because he didn't want us to extend ourselves too far. But in the end, we did have about $1,200 or $1,500 that we were able to turn back to the town, which the town in turn put towards the publication price of the book, the history book, which cost the town about $5,000. And they had to pay for the book all at once. They are selling it at cost, and so they expect eventually to get their money back. But they do have about $1,500 tied up in it still. They had some money in the budget for this, and they had the extra from our celebration and what books have already been sold, so that they have about 800 or 900 books still, I think, to sell. And when those are sold, they expect to come out even. But the town is not allowed to make money on a publication like that. They have to sell it at cost. But Mrs. Lindsay took care of all the publicity, and she did an excellent job. We had about 5,000 inches of publicity before we went through. This was a tremendous amount. When, in 1959, I have a copy of the letter that I wrote to the town board that year, asking them to include money in their current budget, or the budget for the next year, for the cost of printing the book and financing our celebration. Then, one of the things that they felt they ought to do was to have some kind of a motif which could be used on all of our publicity, and this insignia is what we came up with. Now, I've got everything mounted in my book, which perhaps wasn't the best idea, but the town board used it immediately and put it on their stationery. And when your question of stationery came up, I wanted immediately to show you what we had done. There it is, used in a very faint blue ink, so that the letters were typed right over it, but still it could be seen. And then a smaller version of it was used on the envelope. Now that was the official town stationery, and across the bottom it says 1960 Sesquicentennial year, with the town officers up here, of course. But this same motif was used all the way through, and our programs for everything were all the same on the cover. We were very fortunate in that our Rotary Club paid for our covers of all of our programs, and on the back of all these programs was the entire list of activities for our Sesquicentennial celebration. Now this idea had blossomed out of this sort of thing. Here was our one of our markers that we thought we might use, and then someone suggested that let's have a contest and see if some of our artists couldn't come up with something, and this insignia actually was the combination of the work of 2 artists, It's a mill wheel along the stream with the wagons loading, and very likely yours would be a similar motif because it was your mill, it was the starting point of your town. Now, you keep going back because in August of 1959, two of these fifth grade teachers with whom I had worked for several years beforehand came to me and said, "We want to be a part of the celebration. What can we do?" And I said, "Well, what would you like to do?" And they immediately said, "Well, we'd like to put on some kind of a little skit for our PTA." So I said, "Well, our Daniel Penfield had a very interesting life, and perhaps you could take some of the data from his life and make a little skit out of it." So they carefully copied off material that I had, and with cooperation of mothers and the entire fifth grade teachers of the Baird Road School, they produced a very nice little skit, and they thought that they were going to give it for the PTA, but they were fooled. All of a sudden, we needed a program for our March 30th meeting. We had thought first that we would get a political speaker, and so we started in with Keating. No, Mr. Keating couldn't come because Congress was in session, and then we asked Mrs. Weiss, she couldn't come. And then we decided, no, we wouldn't settle for any lesser lights. Some people thought that Dr. Corey, the state historian, would be good, but others thought that he was not well known. And then somebody said, "Well, can't we just keep it local?" And I knew that this little skit was ready. So I said, "Well, I think that probably the children will be good enough, and at least you'll have an audience because you'll have their parents." So we asked them if they would do it, and they were delighted, of course. And the fifth grade of one of the other schools had been working on something not quite as long a program, but they had taken the facts that related to their little area. Now, this was a district that had been in Brighton. It's the Indian Landing District of Brighton, but they are in our Penfield School District. And so they took the little Brighton history of the Indian Landing section and wove it into a poem. And the poem was given that night by about 55 children standing on the stage and speaking it in unison, oral speaking, with selected ones doing solo stanza now and then. Very effective. And I had my tape recorder going that night, and I have a very nice tape of that poem. And then that was followed by the skit on life of Daniel Penfield. Well, we had a full house because, of course, we had, I think, 60 children from Indian Landing and 100 children from the Baird Road School. So that with the other people who had come and all those parents, we had a built-in audience. And there's nothing like playing to a packed house. So that our Sesquicentennial got off on a very good start. Mr. Frank, our supervisor, read a proclamation that night proclaiming this, our Sesquicentennial year. He had read the same proclamation into the minutes of the Board of Supervisors the week before, so that we are officially a part of it. The same day, March 30th, which actually was the exact 150th anniversary of the date of the establishment of our town by New York State law. We were celebrating that rather than the date of our first town meeting. That afternoon, we had a performance by the junior high school in the dedication of a marker, and we had about 200 people out for that. Already the men in the town had started growing beards, so there were some of them around, and the women of Rotary dressed up in costume and served as hostesses for that evening meeting. Now here is the program for that. I've got these all glued in. This was the program for the first, as we call it, our formal meeting. That was why it was in white rather than in cream color, which were the others. But we had all the children's names listed, and they made a souvenir program for them. Poem. and some of the pictures that were taken that night of the children in this skit. This, again, is the skit itself. I've tried to keep all of these things together because I feel that they are part of my historian's record now. In May, the steering committee incorporated. Now that was done so that no one would be held liable for any damages or failures. I mean, this is a legal thing, and I'm sure that your lawyers would advise the same kind of a setup. This meant that the town was not responsible. This was a group of citizens acting together as the Penfield Sesquicentennial Committee. And by incorporating, it made it so that no one person was legally liable if anything should happen or if they would be sued or anything. So we have messages from Keating, and our second activity, the first on March 30th was the dedication of a marker, and then this program, the reception at the high school. And then the Rotary Club put on their annual production and built it around the Sesquicentennial theme, also calling it Time Flies. That was not a part of the Sesquicentennial Committee's activity, but it certainly brought lots of notice to the town because the show is always very well attended for 3 nights. 3,000 people see it. Now, while this was all going on, the newspaper was carrying articles. We had 2 newspapers in town. One newspaper had already been a proposition with doing stories of the old houses, and they ran quite a series. This series was not done by any one person, but by a club in town, and each woman took one house and volunteered to work up a little story about its history. This was not difficult for any of them, but it made a very interesting series of articles. This series of articles about the roads, most of our road names are given for some particular reason, so that the series on roads, which I wrote, appeared in the other paper, so that we weren't showing favoritism, one paper to the other, and that also brought quite a bit of interest locally. We waited until good weather before we had a house tour. In the meantime, the men were growing beards, the women were wearing sunbonnets and shaving buttons, which were sold for 50 cents. If a man wanted to shave, then he wore a shaving cream, that was it. And Sesquicentennial ties, all of these things were revenue-producing items. And that's why you do it, because a little tie that sells for, I guess it's just $1, perhaps cost 40 cents. The committee, you see, make something on things like that. Wooden nickels are printed with a little seal, and the merchants arranged to buy, say, $20 worth of wooden nickels, which they used in their till instead of nickels, gave them as change if people wanted them, with a guarantee that when the thing was all over, they could be redeemed any that they had left, 4 or 5 cents, so the merchant was not out. But of course, many people would buy a quarter's worth and pass them around as souvenirs. So wooden nickels were currency in the town and could be accepted, and you could buy a candy bar for a nickel. This is the souvenir plate, which was reproduced pictures of some of the old buildings. These sold for $2. On the back it has a little brief history about the town. I think we made almost $1 on each of the plates that were sold. And then this is a sunbonnet. Now all of these things you'll be dealt with from people who want to sell them to you. As soon as they find you're having a Sesquicentennial, so that there's no point in my telling you where to get them. But they all tend to whip up your enthusiasm, and people do buy them. You wonder why sometimes, but they do. Now, our house tour was done by taking 8 homes of places that had sufficient appeal to make them attractive for a tour, and we had to approach each hostess and find out if she would be willing to open her home. We only had one who turned us down, which we felt was a very good percentage. But when we had our program, you see, again using our same motif, inside was a story about each of the homes, and then we replaced our schedule on the back with a map this time because we needed it to get around, and then the tickets sold for $1. Well, we sold about 1,000 tickets, and I think they cleared about $700. There was insurance and things like that. But the $700 that they cleared went to pay for bringing teams of oxen and hiring stagecoaches and things like that that made our parade interesting. So all of the money that was cleared on the Historic Homes tour was earmarked for the parade, which was going to be free. And flyers like this were used to advertise the Historic Homes. Now we're getting closer and closer to our homecoming weekend. The historic house tour was on the 4th of June, a beautiful day, and we had chosen the weekend following 4th of July for our homecoming weekend. The official car tickets and the precipitant and badges and the official badges, all of these things were part of the weekend. The parade committee did a very fine job. It was a 2-hour parade, and they had organized it so well that the only thing that happened was that a group of elderly citizens that were supposed to be picked up at one of the schoolhouses waited and waited and waited and never were picked up. But everything else went off just like that. And this confusion of the waiting group, of course, we felt very badly about. But it wasn't until the Model T cars that they were supposed to ride in went by empty that somebody realized that something had gone wrong. But otherwise, we had a stagecoach, and the fire departments of the surrounding towns had been told that they would be welcome to send an exhibit if they wanted to, but we would not accept just a new shiny engine. If they wanted to bring one of their new engines, then they would have to bring some old engine or old exhibit. And so we did have some rather interesting old fire exhibits, hand-drawn carts and a come-as-you-are type of fire volunteers. The oxen that came from Massachusetts were a pair of the most beautiful beasts I have ever seen. They evidently are groomed to the nth degree and are used just for parades. I believe it cost $300 or $400 to bring them, but I think it was worth it. Many of the children in that audience of people lining the parade, and the crowd was estimated from 10 to 20,000 people. They'd never seen an oxen before, and certainly they'd never seen them driving in a team with an ox cart back of them. The flesh of those animals just rippled as they went along. And it was, as I say, I think very, very worthwhile. But the floats were done by the churches, organizations, and there was a lot of interest in building these. And again, when a group of people get together to work on a thing like that, it makes for community goodwill. Our supervisor and his wife certainly were a charming addition to the parade grounds, and Mr. Frank, I believe, was more than cooperative in all of the activities. He came to many of our meetings, and he smoothed the way with loaning funds from the publicity fund in the town to the committee to get them started, to to pay for their first shipment of souvenir things. And then that money was repaid to the town, and from then on they went on their own. Then the weekend of the homecoming, they had the pageant that they call Penfield Portraits. The tickets for the pageant were sold for $1, I think. Yeah, $1, and each one had this little extra tag on it. And that little extra tag was worth 50 cents if you bought a copy of Penfield's Past, which was the history of the town, which appeared on the day of the parade, July 8th. It wasn't done before that. It's just a miracle it was done that day. And that particular weekend, I think 600 or 700 books were sold. Many people taking advantage of this special offer. It made for two things. It got the book circulated, and it also got people to the pageant. And we had about 800 people at each showing of the pageant, 2 different nights. We thought that was very good. The pageant was written by one of the teachers in the school. It was acted by groups who had rehearsed separately. I mean, each scene was a scene unto itself, so that little group could rehearse by themselves. And then they had 2 full dress rehearsals and brought it all together. And it was remarkably well done with this kind of a pageant. You didn't have one character that was all the way through. It was just in groups. I have many things to show you, and many tributes that were written afterwards. I think I probably have talked long enough, and we'll turn the floor over to Sheldon, but certainly I will be more than happy to answer any questions. And this is all here on exhibit here you see.
Well, thank you, Kay, very much. That's wonderful. I'm sure you'll have many questions to ask Kay when after you hear what Mr. Fisher has to tell you. He's had a great deal of experience with centennials and sesquicentennials, and in 1938 he assisted with the centennial observance of the incorporation village of Honeoye Falls, and this was done in the former Lake Avenue Museum, where at that time Mr. Fisher served as curator. I would like to say that Kay certainly isn't enlarging upon the wonderful parade that Penfield had, because Lon and I went over and it was really thrilling, and the oxen were really, it was wonderful. Everything was wonderful, and the boats were so lovely. And we also attended the pageant put on by the young people there, that is the children of the school. It was marvelous marching. It was really remarkable. It was very thrilling for us to see, and we didn't know any of the people involved. And really, they were certainly playing to a packed house. I don't think there was a seat. And it was we got there a little bit late. We were lucky to find a place to sit. So at this time, I'm going to turn over the meeting to Mr. Fisher, and he's going to tell us something about some of the experiences he has had with some sesquicentennials. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you. Thank you, and that was very nice. I don't think there's anything much left for me to talk about.
I'm sure there is.
I think probably, I feel like I've gone through the beginnings of centennials and sesquicentennials. I've been at it so long. My first experience was with the Sullivan expedition sesquicentennial back in 1927, if you remember that far back. I participated in that, and I really, it wasn't my appetite. So that was 1927, so I watched for an anniversary that I could really put my teeth into and work on, and along came the Denonville expedition to fight the Sunky Indians in this area, and that anniversary came in 1937, yes. But I missed one. I started out in 1932 and put on a Pioneer Day affair over at Fisher's to really get my wings. And that was right in the depth of the Depression, as you remember, and no money for anything. And that is where I really learned how to put on community affairs with nothing to start with. And the way I did that was to sell programs, advertising space on programs. And I paid a commission to those who would go out and sell, and so we covered quite an area. And we broke even on that affair. I wrote the pageant myself, and I got someone to direct it. And in that, we portrayed the whole history of the community from the times of the Indian. And I look back on it now, it was really pretty good, and everybody was quite happy. They didn't notice the defects that I knew about and so on, but they went over very well. And then the really big affair was the Denonville Sesquicentennial, more than that, 250th anniversary celebration. And that involved 3 counties. And we had quite a bit of trouble too. I should mention those things. You do have personality troubles in some of these affairs, the bigger it gets. And but I was able to get the Morgan chapter of the New York State Archaeological Association, of which Dr. Parker was president at that time. And he said he never wanted to hear anything more about Denonville. But I went on my own, and I kind of forced the issue, and he grabbed onto it because he saw what a good thing it was, and we stuck with it pretty much through. Well, we started down a sea breeze, the coming of Denonville's army into that area, and we worked through the town board of Honeoye, and they did something like you did out in Penfield. They had a regular committee and made quite an affair of it. We didn't have to worry so much about the money because the town of Honeoye more or less paid for the initial cost. Then through the various organizations in the town, was able to finance it. And then we had Indians come in too, and from the reservation, and they wanted a certain amount of money too, and the Neighborhood Indian Society of Rochester, of which was very strong at that time. So we had our cast, and at that time we were also able to get costumes, and that is a big item today. If you think of having pageants, the costume item is rather serious now in getting them. Although there are individuals who have certain costumes that you can use, we put on an international, or national, I guess it was, international if you include Canada, at the Burning Springs. I found at that time, if you don't have something that is commonly known about, it's very difficult to really put it over. In the Bristol Valley and Burning Springs, LaSalle visited these springs, and that was several hundred years previous. So we had to include LaSalle in that, called the Denonville LaSalle celebration, and then it went over. But if we just stuck to Denonville, we wasn't known too much at that time. And we had a pageant and broadcast from there as the discovery of the first natural gas in America. And we had it during the month of July. We had it on each Saturday, so we built up to the time we got to Honeoye Falls and Lima and Spoonfield. It was pretty well known then through the promotion of publicity. The second Saturday we had a sham battle of Victor, and we were able to use military units out of Rochester, the National Guard, and a number of the reserve groups to staff our army. and that worked very well. Over here in Honeoye Falls, we remember, those of you who were around here at the time, we carried our participants in their costumes right over here and put on a little pageant over here near the park, the bowl over here. And so much for Denonville. And then I was working at the Rochester Historical Society Museum, and Mr. Shewart from Honeoye Falls came. They used to call on him because he had retired and came back home here and was very much interested in your community and dug up a lot of history. And he came in and said, I don't think they're going to observe the centennial of the founding of Honeoye Falls. And I said, he said, would you do something to help me? And I said, surely. And you remember we had this preliminary tour and tea at the Historical Society, and you had your motorcade all the way in, and that really started things. And by using the facility of the Historical Society in Rochester, we were able to give you a send-off for your final affair, your parade, and promotion here in the summertime. Well, then those are the years when we were having many parades and the pageants for the centennials, the centennials and sesquicentennials of the various towns. We had Honeoye and Rochester, of course. We don't want to forget that in 1934. That really was the big one that started us all off. And then we went through a series of them, Wheatland and all of them. Now we're coming in a new batch, starting, well, with, I guess, Penfield, and then this year we have Parrington. And of course, I don't suppose that we all can do as well as they did over in Penfield with all the help, the great talent that you have in the town there. But we can do in our own way, and I think Kay will agree that do as you see fit at the time, and not try to outdo the other towns. And over in Victor, they got the idea too that we will have Sesquicentennial, because the town of Mendon was started at the same time as Mendon and Bloomfield, East Bloomfield. All these three towns were broken off Bloomfield. Now over there we're having trouble. They wanted to celebrate the inauguration by the state. You know, the state legislature enacted this law which would make possible the formation of these towns. But they have poked along so long now that and trying to decide who's going to do the work, and nobody has come forward. And no one has said how they're going to raise the money. So nothing is really going to happen there this year, and I think probably we'll do the same as you for next year when the incorporation, the organization by your town officers took place. I'm very much opposed of big outlays of money for putting these on, because I think that you can, in a modest way, really do a job and make it seem more realistic, and you'll get more out of it. The merchants usually seem to be the ones who are the goats for putting up the money. That's the first thing. How much money will the merchants put up? Well, the merchants in other towns, I won't mention what towns in Western New York really lost heavily through hiring outside groups to come in and put on their program, because they all thought, well, they're going to do the work. Well, near as I can find out, they just make the plans and they get you to do the work. They flatter individuals, and pretty soon they're all doing the work anyway. So I feel that if you're going to have a Sesquicentennial program, that you should count on doing the work yourselves, and spread it around to those who are capable, and raise the money pretty much as Kay has outlined to you that they did over there last year. I don't know just how much more I can tell you. You see, I am an antique at this now. It's almost another generation when we were doing these things. Time's creeping along awfully fast. And when you're dealing with history, it doesn't seem like any time at all. Only when it's brought forth like it's recent here as Penfield Sesquicentennial that you realize that you've got an entirely new way of doing things, and it's very efficient and well, I hope more profitable. Now, we're both ready for any questions that you may ask, and I probably have missed the point on some of the things I should have talked on. You bring it out of us.
I'd like to make one point, and that is, I think that Sheldon would agree with me, that whatever you do, base it on true facts of history. And let your historian be free enough from the duties of the Sesquicentennial itself, so that she can be a reference, and you can consult her and say, well, now, is this right? Because if you're going to celebrate, it's just as easy to celebrate and say that give one picture as another, and that's what you're right.
Well, I might add to that. Just got a letter from Alva Fisher over in Parrington. She wrote a letter asking for certain historical facts about Parrington, and before she had the letter done, she was informed that I guess they were trying to ease her out for writing the history of Parrington, and they had hired somebody to take over, and what they weren't going to do, I don't know, but apparently they just don't want a lot of these historical facts. They want to make it more like Hollywood, you see, to insert what they want that is glamorous and maybe colorful and not the true picture of the community.
Well, thank you, both of you, and I'm sure there are many more things that you can tell us. You just need some questions. How about it, folks? Let's hear from the rest of you.
Here are pictures of the parade.
I would like to say that so I did understand the supervisor of the town of Parrington to St. Buffalo that they had sent out some invitations to organizations that they had been sent out from the town board, 2 organizations, at which time I suppose they were invited to this big committee meeting, and from this the smaller steering committee was organized. But I know that Ms. Fisher was very actively preparing history, and that was one of the reasons she wasn't able to attend the meetings of Buffalo, so I'm sort of surprised to hear that. I also know that they are engaging the outside people to take over and fill up, which of course we are strongly advised against by both these very experienced historians here. Some of the rest of you, not just me, ask some questions. Let's hear something.
In the high school, yes. They decided that it would be lovely to do it outdoors, but you did run the risk of bad weather, and they felt it better to be safe, and we had a new stage, or a new auditorium and stage, and the facilities of lighting and all, I think, were so tempting that they just discontinued very early any idea of doing it outside. While the history of the town was being written, the history of the fire department was also being written. I think this is one thing that came out of ours, that there were several publications. There was one which I wasn't able to dig out of my files. I know I've got it, but I can't find out where I put it. Biographies of some of the families, and this history of the volunteer fire department, and then the history which I wrote, and then another thing which I was pleased with was that the school children used the Sesquicentennial theme in planning their yearbook. Well, now again, this had to be done in September, you'll see, and came out in June. and they interweaved little sketches. I guess they borrowed old pictures, that was it, and used them. Here, for instance, in the front of the ad section was the old general store. And so again, the theme, the Sesquicentennial theme, was used. And we tried to work the children into things as much as possible.
There's one thought that has been forcibly brought home to me over in our county, for each of the towns, is the lack of convenient historical publications on the various communities. How the Victor Central School is running a contest which our Victor Historical Society has sponsored, and will give a prize for the town of Victor in 1860 and today. Well, they're having one awful time trying to find material, and there just doesn't seem to be histories around available. And I think that the same is true here. Now, where can you find a good history outside of McIntosh of, say, the town of Mendon?
Honeoye Falls paper.
Well, yeah, how many keep the clippings? So there's another thing. How many would they have them in the library?
How far does our paper go back to publication, Emma?
Well, I would like to say that I have a lot of clippings. My mother's interest in keeping clippings for many years back, what appealed to her. And we have had a good many of the Honeoye Falls Times given to us, so that, we could clip from those because we have duplicates of letters, homecoming time, and letters from former residents in which many incidents and anecdotes are related. Not just maybe the actual history, but were very colorful happenings of the village long ago and not so long ago. And so, of course, I have written up the history of Honeoye Falls, which has been given before a good many of the organizations in the village and the town as well. But actually, there's no formal history outside of the McIntosh.
Diaries?
We don't seem to have any diaries.
Emma, when was a paper first published in Honeoye Falls, do you know?
The very first paper was published by Gary Howe, a traveling theatrical actor who remained here to go into the publishing business in 1838. That was the first.
Was it then continuous, week by week for some time?
It was almost continuous. There was a little lapse. But we have a copy here tonight of the Mendon Free Press. We have quite a few of the old Honeoye Falls Times. And we have a good many papers, and as I say, copies of here's the First Times Homecoming edition, one right here, and it proved great success, and we have several of those, that in addition to what my mother had clipped from into her scrapbooks. So that if all this material could be assembled, we would have quite a history.
Honeoye Falls had a paper at times in the morning.
That's what makes it interesting.
Well, I think it'd be nice if you could condense some of these newspaper clippings into a convenient handbook, or something maybe not as nice or as elaborate as Kay's, but even in pamphlet form, so that the schools could use them.
Well, souvenir programs of other places that you might like to pass around too.
About the parade, I'm sure you're all very much interested in that. Perhaps that's one of the most colorful, or perhaps the most colorful part of the Sesquicentennial. And I'm sure these folks can tell you how they go about that, and how the floats are, something about the floats. And both of you could add to that. Sheldon and Kay?
Go ahead.
Well,
at our parade, I was busy writing.
It was a nice parade. You will find that there are many groups that are anxious to appear in parades, and by offering a prize, it helps some. Some just go to them for the prizes, the trophies. Say, for instance, the one farthest away, or the best looking one, or the most men in line, and so on. First, the firemen here are used to that. They know just how to do it. They're old masters at it. And possibly a chairman could be, for the parade, could be taken from your fireman. But you had a very nice one here, the centennial of your village. That was a very nice parade. I remember that very much.
Hal was looking at me and wondering if I dared to tell a little tale about that. I'm almost afraid she'll tell it if I don't.
That's a good story.
Well, maybe I could tell it. I happen to know, this is really a terrible thing for me to have done then, but at any rate, it's back in 1930. I don't think I'd dare to do it now. But I did tell our mayor, Mr. Despard, it would be nice if he offered a prize for the best float. And Mr. Despard innocently did not know that there was to be just one float. But we did. And it was very reluctantly, I might add, for the benefit of my husband who's out of sight, but nevertheless, I'm sure he's there. And he did get the float together. And it was sort of comic in a way, but it was a float. We had a lot of fun with it. And of course, as I say, we did win the prize because we had no competitors, and we did get what the village of $10. But apparently the townspeople and all the folks that lined the streets with the farmers' parade got quite a kick out of our float. And we had the big truck, and we had quite a lot of stuff on it, and we had rented costumes, and we went to really a lot of trouble. I really felt that in spite of the fact that I started playing a little trick on the mayor, that we did earn that, because I'm sure that it was nice in the Centennial Parade to have at least one float. That was all there was in it. So I hope in the Sesquicentennial Parade that there will be lots of floats, not all fire apparatus.
Well, I think in a community like Mendon, you will find that there are enough tractors and trucks so that groups will get together and realize that it's not going to be too difficult to put a float in a parade. Actually, Penfield didn't offer any prize. There wasn't any inkling of a prize even. And I think that the parade would have been excellent without their things that they did hire. I know they hired the oxen and they hired the stagecoach, but we had enough in the parade so that they wouldn't have been missed if they weren't there. They certainly were a fine addition. But as you see, many of the different organizations, there was a little schoolhouse that had been made up by the PTA and the Girl Scouts going together, and they tried to do this. They had a big meeting, again, of all the people from the organizations, and they put people with like interests together. And instead of saying, now you make a float that says PTA, they said, why don't you make a float that shows early education? And so the float that they devised was the skeleton of a little one-room school, and all of the rafters and the joists were decorated with these little Phoenix roses, so that it made a very pretty float. And then inside were some old desks and half a dozen children and a schoolmaster. And of course, the children that got to ride on a float in the parade were very special. Quite thrilled with the opportunity.
I will say another very small community up near Brockport. I was trying to think of the name of this town, and yes, no, this was up
around Hilton. Hamlin,
yes,
the Hamlin.
Yes, that's where it was. Well, last summer they had a Sesquicentennial, and they really had a marvelous parade, and we went down to see it, and it was such a small community, but they did have a great many floats and some awfully clever ones. And it was very worthwhile. So, I mean, as far as this town is concerned, this is so much larger. We should certainly have a very impressive and big and long parade. But
I think that the merchants realize that a parade brings people into the community. therefore they may put a vote.
Are there other questions?
I have a comment to make. I often wondered what happened to that state marker, that historical marker that we found Mr. Despard's farm.
That's the one that's going to be dedicated as soon as the town superintendent can.
I wrote the inscription on that. I'd forgotten how many years ago.
Oh,
And
why?
we wondered whatever happened to it.
Why was it stored in somebody's
It
cellar?
was given to the community at the time
That
of
was a
Mayor
fascinating
Despard,
story.
the former mayor, Mr. Despard was the mayor at that time, 1936, and he, I guess, placed it in his place of business, his building for safekeeping until he could get it set up or do something about it, and he just simply forgot all about it. And when it changed hands, the building was sold, and everything, the building was being emptied out, and the stuff coming in from the new owner, this was discovered. And he called me up, and it was brought down to our house. The State Department has painted it, and waits only now the placing of it by the town superintendent of highways, who will take care of it. Other questions? Now, we really should be hearing more questions. Comments? Can these folks think of something else to tell us?
Well, what is the point that you would like brought out? More is it the cost, or go somebody do the work, or ideas? Or what do you think that?
I think one thing that you should bring out is that this is a celebration for everybody in the town. You're very fortunate to have your historical society as a nucleus, but don't have people who have perhaps just moved to town last year feel excluded, that they think that, well, this is something the historical society are doing and we can't be a part of it. But try to organize committees that bring in all classes of people, all groups of people, so that you may be working with someone that you haven't met before, but this is quite an opportunity.
And I think that was borne out in your town, where probably the biggest percentage of them are newcomers within the past few years.
Well, we of course have been deluged with people, and I think that you are beginning to be. People are beginning to move out here to your town because they like the rural atmosphere and the open spaces. And these are very interesting group of people, and are probably just eager to get into community activities.
Well, actually, who is expected to start the ball rolling? Is it the town board?
I'd say your ball is already rolling.
Yes, but who
Officially.
starts it? It has to be started.
It has to be started. In my case, I think that I wrote those letters 2 years ago and asked the organizations to, because I was aware of the date coming up. They weren't.
Then you, as a historian, started.
Yes.
I see.
And then the organizations meeting together carried the ball from there by appointing a steering committee, and I was simply one of that steering committee. And there were 10 of us, I think, that got together.
And then you...
and I will admit that we didn't get the first person that we asked for the general chairman. But we couldn't have had a better one when we finally came up with Mr. and Mrs. Lindsay. And the fact that she was home and could do some things, I think the co-chairmanship was an excellent idea in this case. I'm not sure that co-chairman of different families would have been as satisfactory.
Well, hasn't it been the custom in some communities for the invitations to be issued to the town board, then the committee select its chairman or co-chairman and go ahead with it?
Well, in our case, our supervisor was the one who went out and interviewed the people and asked them if they would do it, so that it had an official stand.
That's why I thought.
Certainly, you don't want your town board not working with your.
Of course, because you're all of that. Well, my principal idea tonight in having this brought before the Historical Society, I thought that we were the logical group to hear about this, and consider it, and so that this could be carried back to other organizations and sort of pep talks and so forth. And I'm sure most of the organizations of the town are represented here tonight. We did hope to have 2 or 3 others, and perhaps something's kept them from coming because they were alerted to this and invited to come and send a delegate. You had your hand up, Jane?
Yes, inasmuch as Penfield spent 5 years planning for theirs.
Jane, she has a question.
Yes.
How much, you had quite a celebration. How much could we be expected to put on with so much shorter period of time?
Well, just remember this, that we have had no historical society working. You have. I think that possibly we're equal in because you've had a tremendous number of people for your historical society meetings. I think this is wonderful. Your meeting out in Mendon and your meetings here have brought people all together, so that already you've got a nucleus that are aware of history and interested in it. You've got your fortnightly group that certainly would be equivalent to Penfield's Friday Club, which did this series of house articles that I was just about to pass around.